So enhancing cognitive competence or cognitive capacity um, is directly a result of using the mind, the brain, the wetware more efficiently. So the way we do that is by eliminating the noise that's going on continually. The endless stream, the endless flow of thought and fantasy that's going on constantly. That you catch glimpses of now and then when those thoughts become disturbing, but basically you're unconscious of. So in other words, if I asked you to tell me what you had been thinking about an hour ago, you couldn't tell me, or even 10 minutes ago, you couldn't tell me, because you're really unconscious of this process that's going on. And this is very easily ascertainable and visible to you. It's accessible to you. If you just take a moment and try to observe your thoughts, recognize each one. Let's say you're remembering something that happened yesterday. You say, remembering. If you're thinking about something you have to do later, you name it and you say, okay, planning. If you're worrying, you say worrying. So you're watching the mind thinking, this flow of this pattern of thought. That's this pattern of thought that never stops until you're sleeping. Then you wake up and it starts again, and each thought leads to another. There maybe seem to be a thread, but they also seem to jump around. They're disconnected, right? So they really make no sense. They're going nowhere. They're just spinning. It's a wheel. It's a wheel of thought. It's a spinning wheel that never has any traction. There's no traction to it, right? So it's just spinning in place. And if you observe that, you'll see very clearly. It's a very simple exercise. And that simple exercise, observing the thoughts, is the core of the development, the beginning of the development of consciousness, intelligence, and cognitive competence, or cognitive capacity. Because it's the first step in taking control, harnessing the energy of the mind instead of squandering it. It's the very first step, becoming aware of the thoughts. Very simple, but very difficult to do, because you'll find if you do that, you sit, take a deep breath. When you take a deep breath, you recenter the focus of attention on the body. You bring the mind back to the body. And what you're doing when you take a deep breath and you focus on the breath, hold it. You are activating consciousness. In other words, you're shutting down the finite mind for that moment, and you're becoming aware. You're becoming conscious. You're becoming aware of what's going on. So there's a quietness there, but there's an openness and attention there. So you take the breath, and then you watch the thought come in. With me, it's hard, because if I do that, I stop thinking. But let's say, so you think about, you're worrying, and you say worrying, and immediately the thought stops. You wait, take another breath, and then I'm starting to think about what I have to do later. And you say anticipation, name it. And you sit, take another deep breath, and you start to feel your mind wandering, and you say wandering, and you go on and go on, and keep doing that, and then you start to get restless, and you say restlessness, and you'll see that you might be able to do that Become aware of each thought, name it, go back to your breath. You might be able to do that for maybe a minute before you fail. So you have access to your mind, the capabilities, your brain, for about a minute at most. What does that say about your cognitive capacity? This is the most powerful thing. The stuff in here is the most powerful thing we know of in the universe right now. And you could use it for a minute. And then what will happen is you'll see that your mind just follows the thoughts and you forget about what you're supposed to be doing. So this is the first step in becoming more intelligent, because later it leads to more powerful, much more profound and powerful things. Because as you practice this observation of the thought, and then you bring the mind back with awareness, consciousness with awareness, I'm aware of my thoughts, so look at it. So now I'm noticing that there's a dichotomy between what I'm thinking and the fact that I can be aware of my thoughts. So there's a running stream of conditioned stream of thoughts, a pattern. Everything is conditioned and patterns. So all behavior is conditioned patterns through socialization and how you're raised. Your parents, your relationships. So there's patterns there's a quality or flavor to your thoughts, patterns of thought. And then you have the thought, it's running on its own autonomously. You're like a machine, a robot. It's running, because you have no will, you have no say in the matter. These thoughts are just arising from seemingly out of nowhere. Because you could examine this yourself. If you try to get to the place where the thoughts come from, you can't see it. It's not accessible to you. The thoughts just keep arising of their own accord. You don't choose what to think, because you can't get to that place where the thoughts arise. There is no choosing. So you have very little or no free will, or limited free will in what you choose to think or how you choose to use your mind. There is no choice. So it's a machine, a robot, a conditioned machine, a program that you're running. So by becoming conscious of that stream, that robotic, mechanistic, conditioned stream, spinning thoughts, you gain traction, because what will happen is you'll start to identify more with that observing presence, which is consciousness or awareness, and you'll start to see that disassociate yourself or separate yourself from the thoughts. And once you do that, they stop, because you'll notice that the moment you identify the thought, and the next one, and the next one, the moment you identify it stops. And then you have a moment of awareness. You recognize the thought worrying, remembering, restlessness. You're naming the pattern of the mind, the thinking. And then after each naming, there's a stop, quiet, moment of consciousness. And eventually, through training, that will be your normal condition. That moment of consciousness, awareness, will expand more and more as you practice. And again, it's going to be very difficult, but as you practice, it'll expand more and more until that's the way you live your life. Now, there's a tremendous, profound difference in the two ways of living. Living mindlessly, unconsciously, following the dream. It's like a dream. It's exactly like a dream. When the way your mind uses you in this spinning wheel of thought is that you have no control over it. So it's the same as in that way as a dream, isn't it? Because when you go to sleep, You don't control what you dream. It just happens. Similarly, during the day. So basically, you're living your life. You're sleepwalking like a zombie. You're living your life in a dream 98% of the time. So when you wake up from that dream, you face a completely different world. The quality of being when you become just fully conscious and you're just aware all the time and the stream of thought has stopped is what they call, they use these fancy words like nirvana or bliss or joy, but what it is, it's just complete cognitive capacity. You have complete ability to focus your mind, and there's a richness there and a quality of richness, because what you've done by following the thoughts at the same time as you're conditioning the awareness to be primary and the thought stream to stop, you're also examining all the patterns of thoughts. And throughout the day you're doing this meditation. This whole trip is not about you sitting here meditating like this, although this is, to me, this is a luxury. When you sit and you do your moving meditation or your silent meditation or your breathing meditation, I mean, this stuff is beautiful. It's luxury. But what I'm talking about, training awareness, you do all day long. This is something you do all day long. This is a new way of life. There's a new commitment, an entire commitment, and everything else in your life is secondary. Every single thing, your children, your lover, your gay lover, your job, your boss, all those are insignificant in comparison once you start this process. Because as you extend this process and you become more conscious and more human and more intelligent, all those other secondary relationships are enriched. So you don't have to worry about being a mommy or playing a role or making people happy, right? Or thinking you're a piece of shit, or worrying about the future, or regretting the past. Because you know what? You've processed all those things. In the process of observing the thoughts, you've learned to understand the origin and the patterns of your foolish thinking and your wasted energy. And by recognizing the patterns of thought and becoming more aware and enriching awareness and consciousness and intelligence, you learn to see that those are unworthy and useless shit. It just happens that way. When you become more conscious, more aware of the patterns of your filthy thought, your filthy, untrained, slothful, tiny, stupid mind, this, spinning wheel, you recognize the body just says, okay, the mind body just says, okay, enough of that. Consciousness just makes a decision. Enough of that, and your life becomes enriched. Now that's a long process. That could take. It depends on the individual. Some people have more of a breakthrough moment. Other people take it's gradually over a year or 2 years. I've been practicing, intensely for almost 5 years, and it never ends. Life just becomes more rich. Consciousness is limitless, so it just keeps expanding. The knowing capability, the evidence that allows us to gain insight and knowledge is inexhaustible. So it just keeps growing and growing and growing. There's no end to it. No matter where you start, if you think you have it all together, you're either a fool or you're lying to yourself. But if you do think you have it all together, there's always a way to. It never ends. There's no end to knowing and becoming conscious. Consciousness has no limits. So when you identify with consciousness, so through examination of the thoughts, again, you gain discernment. And little by little, you gain mastery over the thinking mind until you have complete mastery. And then when you look back on your life, you say to yourself, I was a fucking zombie before I learned this practice. Before I came conscious, I was, no matter what you have or how much you have, that makes no difference. You're judging yourself by the wrong standards. Once you taste consciousness, those things will have, material gain and wealth and all that will have no meaning to you. Because you'll understand the true, be able to cash in on the true coin of the realm, the true beauty and essence of being alive and life. And who you truly are. Imagine that, finding out who you truly are and the capacity, limitless capacity that you have to learn and to be. This aliveness, tremendous aliveness.